They thought they could get away with it. The boys had been pushing boundaries for weeks, testing the patience of the neighbors, causing minor disruptions that escalated each day. Their careless laughter and loud voices shattered the peace of Willow Lane, a street known for its quiet charm. At the heart of the neighborhood stood Walter Grace's modest house, a sanctuary of greenery and blooms, lovingly nurtured by his calloused hands over decades. The boys didn't see the years of care embedded in each petal, each stem. They saw only an opportunity for mischief. Walter sat on his front porch that afternoon, the light breeze ruffling his white hair as he watched the boys play basketball near the corner. His garden sprawled before him, an explosion of colors and textures. Roses, marigolds, and hydrangeas thrived under his care, their blossoms vibrant against the deep green of carefully manicured hedges. The garden wasn't just a hobby, it was his history, a connection to his late wife, Margaret, who had planted the first rosebush with him years ago. Every bloom carried a memory, every corner whispered a story. The Thompson boys had moved into the neighborhood only a month prior, bringing with them an unsettling energy. Their father, a broad-shouldered man with a perpetual scowl, had barely acknowledged Walter when he brought over a basket of fresh vegetables as a welcoming gesture. The boys, Liam and Ryan, had muttered a half-hearted thanks before retreating into the house. Walter had noticed Emily, the youngest of the three siblings, standing in the doorway, her wide eyes peering curiously at him. She offered a shy smile before disappearing inside. Since then, Liam and Ryan had become a nuisance. Walter often caught them loitering near his garden, their whispers turning to laughter as they pointed at his flowers. Once, he found a rosebush broken, its stem crudely snapped in half. Another time, he discovered trampled daisies near the edge of the lawn. He didn't confront them directly, hoping they would grow bored and leave him be. But their behavior grew bolder with each passing day. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in hues of gold and crimson, Walter heard the unmistakable sound of feet crunching against gravel. He rose from his chair, the creak of his knees accompanied by the rustle of the porch swing. Liam stood at the edge of the garden, his sneaker planted firmly on a patch of daisies, his younger brother laughing behind him. The basketball rolled lazily across the lawn, its path carving a trail through the flowers. "Get out of my garden," Walter called, his voice firm but calm. Liam straightened, meeting Walter's gaze with a smirk. "Relax, old man, it's just some flowers." "They're not just flowers," Walter replied, his tone cooling. "Leave now." Ryan tugged at Liam's sleeve, muttering something under his breath, but Liam shrugged him off. "Whatever," Liam muttered before kicking the basketball toward his brother and walking away. Ryan followed, glancing back at Walter with an uneasy expression before disappearing around the corner. Walter knelt beside the daisies, his hands trembling slightly as he assessed the damage. The crushed petals and broken stems spoke of more than carelessness. They spoke of disrespect. His garden, his refuge, was no longer a safe haven. That night, as he sat in the dim light of his living room, he felt the weight of Margaret's absence more acutely than ever. She would have known what to do, how to handle the boys. She had always been the gentler of the two, her patience boundless, her words kind but firm. Walter sipped his tea, the bitterness mirroring his thoughts. Tomorrow, he decided, he would replant the daisies. He wouldn't let their actions destroy what he had built. The morning arrived with a soft glow, the sunlight spilling through the lace curtains and pooling on the worn wooden floors. Walter donned his gardening gloves and stepped outside, the cool air brushing against his face. As he worked, his movements were deliberate, each snip of the shears and pat of the soil carrying a sense of quiet resolve. He didn't notice Emily standing at the edge of the yard until she cleared her throat. Walter looked up, startled. The girl clutched a small pot in her hands, a sprig of lavender nestled inside. Hi," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I brought this for your flowers. I mean, to replace the ones Liam messed up." Walter straightened, brushing the dirt from his gloves. "That's very thoughtful of you, Emily. Thank you." She shifted her weight, her gaze darting between Walter and the ground. "I'm sorry about my brothers," she murmured. They don't think about how their actions affect people." Walter studied her for a moment, noting the way her shoulders slumped and her fingers fidgeted with the edge of her sweater. "Would you like to help me plant it?" he asked, his voice gentle. Emily hesitated before nodding. Together, they found a spot near the damaged daisies. Walter handed her a small spade and guided her on how to dig a proper hole for the plant. As they worked, he shared little stories about the garden, his tone steady and calm. He spoke of Margaret, of the long afternoons they had spent tending to the flowers together. "Do you think people can grow strong even if no one takes care of them?" Emily asked suddenly, her voice trembling. Walter paused, the weight of her question settling over him. "It's harder," he admitted, "but it's possible, especially if someone shows them how." Emily nodded, her fingers brushing the lavender's delicate leaves. Before she could say more, a sharp voice cut through the morning air. "Emily!" Mr. Thompson's booming tone made them both flinch. Walter looked up to see the man storming across the street, Liam and Ryan trailing behind him with smug expressions. "What are you doing over here?" Mr. Thompson demanded, his gaze dark and accusatory. "She was helping me," Walter interjected, stepping forward. "She brought a lavender plant to replace the flowers your boys damaged." Mr. Thompson snorted, his eyes narrowing. "Maybe you should focus on your own garden and leave my kids alone." Walter's jaw tightened, but he held his ground. Teaching kindness isn't interference. The tension hung thick in the air. Emily shrank back, clutching the spade like a lifeline. "Come on," Mr. Thompson barked, grabbing her arm and pulling her away. Liam and Ryan lingered for a moment, their smirks cutting through Walter like a blade. Liam kicked at a loose stone, sending it skittering toward the garden. "Nice flowers," he sneered before following his father. That evening, Walter sat alone in his living room, the weight of the day pressing heavily on him. He glanced at the photo of Margaret on the mantel, her warm smile, a reminder of the strength he had once drawn from her. The garden was more than just flowers. It was a testament to resilience, to the beauty that could emerge even in the face of adversity. The following nights brought more acts of vandalism. Broken rose bushes, overturned pots, crude words scrawled on the fence. Each morning, Walter repaired the damage with quiet determination, refusing to let the boy's actions break his spirit. But the loneliness of the fight began to wear on him. One morning, as he knelt in the dirt, replanting yet another destroyed flower, he noticed neighbors watching from their windows, their faces filled with a mix of sympathy and hesitation. Walter decided he couldn't do this alone. He knocked on doors, starting with Mr. Foster, who nodded solemnly as Walter shared his story. Door by door, Walter rallied the neighbors, urging them to stand together. By the end of the day, a small group gathered in his living room, their shared frustration turning into a quiet resolve. They drafted a letter addressed to Mr. Thompson, outlining their concerns and demanding accountability. The next morning, Walter woke to the sound of raised voices outside. Mr. Thompson stood on his porch, the letter clutched in his fist, his face red with anger. "I don't need a bunch of busybodies telling me how to raise my kids," he shouted, his words carrying across the street. Walter stepped outside, his back straight despite the ache in his knees. He approached the growing crowd, his voice calm but firm. "Your son's actions affect more than just me. This is about respect for the community." Mr. Thompson sneered. "Who do you think you are?" Walter met his gaze steadily. "Someone who deserves respect, just like everyone else on this street." Before Mr. Thompson could respond, Liam stepped forward, his usual bravado replaced by unease. "I'm sorry," he muttered, his voice barely audible. "I didn't think about how much we were hurting you." The admission stunned everyone, including Mr. Thompson. Walter studied the boy for a moment before nodding. "Acknowledging the harm is the first step," he said. "The next is making amends." Liam glanced at his father, whose scowl deepened, but he didn't protest. Emily stepped forward, her eyes shining with quiet determination. "We can fix this," she said. In the days that followed, the neighbors came together to restore the garden. Liam and Emily worked alongside Walter, planting new flowers and repainting the fence. The acts of repair were more than physical. They were a reclamation of the peace that had been stolen. As the garden bloomed once more, Walter sat on his porch, watching the neighborhood come alive with a renewed sense of unity. The scars remained, but they were a reminder of resilience, of the strength that could be found in standing together. For the first time in weeks, Walter felt at peace, knowing that his fight had planted seeds of change, not just in the soil, but in the hearts of those around him.